Hello and welcome to Random Fandom FC, the podcast where we meet a new fan each week, learn how they ended up supporting their team, what's been their highest high, their lowest low, and anything else we should know. My name's Rob, an Arsenal fan living in the States, and I'll be your host. Okay, well, last week we added a new country to the map as we welcomed Carlos from Canada and we covered the Vancouver Whitecaps. This week, we're going back to Europe, in fact, back to the UK, but the fan in question is from the other side of the world. So let's find out who we've got on Random Fandom this week. Well, as the crowd are chanting, who are you and who do you support?
My name's Rob. I support Tottenham Hotspur, but I'm happy to give you a bit more background than a few words if that works.
Yeah, of course. So just for everyone who doesn't know, me and Rob have met in a different life where my buddy Brian and I do a Formula One podcast for anybody who doesn't know. A little plug here, Dirty Side of the Track, if you're Formula One fans. And we met Rob because he's a big Formula One fantasy guy and he's got just wealth of knowledge on it. But then we found out that we both had a shared passion of not just F1, but football as well. So everything was going great until you mentioned who you supported. So
Yeah, look, I don't think we can agree on every little thing. I know as Ferrari fans, it's easy to support the Scuderia, but as your crosstown rival Tottenham, it's always been let's say a bit of a sensitive subject for my fellow Arsenal fans.
so, how did you find Spurs? Why do you support Spurs, and for how long have you been a Spurs fan?
Yeah, I mean it's a question I ask myself every day until recently for the trophy drought they've gone through. But I wouldn't I played football, soccer, depending on where you're listening, growing up. And then when I probably got to the age of about 9 or 10, I stopped playing football and lost an interest in it. And I got back into it in 2009. I'm from Australia originally, so through, funnily enough, FIFA '09, the video game that I at the time owned on PlayStation, and a lot of my friends played it, so it was just a nice little way for us to all like stay connected in high school. And a lot of them at the time supported Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool. All of the big clubs still are all big clubs in Europe, and I didn't want to be one of those fans that just jumped on the bandwagon of the latest winner of the Prem. So I went for a team on FIFA '09 by the name of Tottenham. I didn't know much about them, but they had a couple of very good players back then. Gareth Bale, I had to do my research on the age, but Gareth Bale was only 19 and Luka Modric was 22. So it's crazy to think that they're obviously retired now, but that those two players kind of left a lasting impression on me, and why I essentially got into Tottenham as a fan for what's probably 16, 17 years now.
Do you have a memory of like once you decided to commit to Spurs? Do you have a memory of the kind of first game or first sort of memory of watching them?
I'd honestly be very hard pressed to remember the very first game. Um, I remember, but there was a game probably within the first couple of years of following them where one of the strikers at the time, Dimitar Berbatov, this probably was mid 2010s, I'm guessing. Um, he scored a hat trick for Tottenham in one of their games, and it just kind of stuck out as a memory well before I feel like Harry Kane, for instance, put the team a little bit more on the map. So, yeah, I couldn't tell you the year, I couldn't tell you the opponent, but it was I guess, three goals for a lesser known striker at the time that went on to do bigger and better things.
Yeah, which was sometimes the way with you boys that you would bring a player through and then unfortunately have to sell them and watch them go and do things elsewhere because
Mm,
Berbatov was superb for United.
mm.
What we like to drill into to get this one out the way is let's get the awful memories out the way. So we like to talk about fans' lowest lows and highest highs. I've kind of got a feeling about what maybe one of the highest highs is going to be given the recent events, but let's go and plumb the depths first. What's your worst moment as a Spurs fan where you just want the ground to open up and swallow you?
It's funnily enough probably the same year I had one of my highest highs, because for a team like Tottenham to finish 17th, it's not something that people forget about too easily, which is obviously the result we've just had in the season gone. And I think it's been a pretty checkered last 12 months being a Spurs fan, because there's been, a lot of potential written about, Ange Postecoglou and the kind of strategies and tactics he has to make Spurs an attractive brand of football. But, it also means you go, there's a lot of risk and you go all in on a strategy like that, and it can leave a team like Tottenham, who don't have a very good defensive line, exposed at the back. So it has been the last season or so, particularly with injuries, a pretty hard period of time to root for them. Yes, one particular trophy in recent memory has maybe changed the course, even if it is perhaps papering over the cracks. But I think this season, this season has been a really hard season to be a fan, just because of how many, losses and draws with opponents we should have beaten have kind of occurred.
Well, yeah, I think maybe you hit the nail on the head with that last piece, like that you should have beaten because you got some really weird results. If you just look at the results Spurs had last year, you've got, I think, like losing to Leicester and probably even losing points to
Yeah.
Ipswich, teams you should be steamrolling.
Mm.
Then you'll go and beat Man City. And it's like, they've,
Make it make sense.
yeah, complete Jekyll and Hyde year this year, but unfortunately, probably
Yeah.
well, whichever one you want to say, Hyde than Jekyll. I'm not sure which one's which, to be honest. But yeah, you just kind of it wasn't. My brother-in-law Dean was just saying it's just not an easy time to be a Spurs fan because week after week you're just
Mm.
looking forward to, well, how are we going to screw it up this week?
Yeah, it's just been such a bipolar season. Probably last even year and a half for them after that hot start to Ange's first year. So let's see what they can do next year, I guess.
Well, okay, so let's before we go to the highest highlights, just dig into that a little bit because as an Australian, when Ange gets appointed, did you know anything about him and was it good to see an Australian in at the helm at the team you support?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you could see a groundswell of support come from Australia, and a lot of my friends, my friends from back home who were fair weather Chelsea fans or fair weather Manchester United fans suddenly had an actual reason to support a team with an Australian, whether it was a talismanic player like Tim Cahill years ago for Everton or Postecoglou now for Tottenham. It's been a reason to root for a team that isn't just usually most people's default choice. And I think it's been, yeah, really exciting. I wouldn't say I'd be lying if I said I knew everything about Postecoglou lore, but to I do know that and had known of him in kind of football circles in Australia because he managed the Brisbane Roar, which is one of the Australian A-League teams. I think he led them to a title there years ago. He obviously managed the Socceroos for a period of time as well in the 2010s, and then has done stints in Asia and more recently in Ireland,
Scotland with
Scotland.
Celtic. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Yes. Yeah, I should know that. But I think it's just nice to see an Australian on the map and managing a big European club, because there's really not that much recognition that gets by for Australian footballers or coaches.
So yeah, because you're right. He came in and he kind of took the Premier League by storm because I think the first few months of his reign, like Ange Ball as they were calling it,
Mm,
was you. I think Tottenham were top of the league. Everyone said you're going to win everything, and then just from kind of the outside looking in perspective, it just felt like everyone figured them out. It's like, hang on a minute, they're going to play this really risky high line.
mm,
You can just really take advantage of that, and it was like everyone worked it out and started piling in. And it all sort of fell off then, really, Premier
mm.
League wise, anyway, because the same thing then carried through into this year. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so what do you make of his? Is he stubborn and won't change it? Is he fully committed to his philosophy? What do you kind of see as how he goes about it?
I guess there are much more tactically adept people either listening to this or who just generally know football than myself. But I think he does come across as someone who has his philosophy and has obviously brought success to other clubs with these particular strategies and tactics. Does it work at a team like Tottenham in a league like the Premier League? I don't know if there's a obvious yes or no answer to that question, because it is very nuanced with how different teams play and how they prepare for a team like Tottenham. So I don't know. I'd worry it would become his undoing at some point. I'd love to see Ange stay with Tottenham for however many more years and lead them to more silverware, but it is a very, as you say, dangerous a strategy to play with such a high line, and we're not exactly the strongest team defensively either. So it kind of is a two birds, one stone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so I do want to drill into that a little bit more, but let's get on to kind of highest highs then. And I don't want to force you into saying the recent trophy because you might have some other memories as well over the time. But what is your sort of your highest high of supporting Spurs?
Yeah, it has to be the Europa League. I think any Tottenham fan would agree with that. It's just simply the monkey off the back, as I mentioned before, that has plagued us for so many years. I think it's what, 18, 17 years since we last won silverware, and it is, I think, or it has until now become the butt of Tottenham jokes, the whole Spursy or the empty trophy cabinets. It's nice to obviously get that one out of the way. And I think even though I don't suddenly expect the Spurs to go on a winning run of more trophies in the next 12 months, I think it certainly takes the pressure off. And for a player like Heung-min Son, who has been a stalwart of the club for so many years, it's nice to see him and many other loyal players and staff rewarded with, a trophy of that significance.
Yeah. When did let me rephrase this. Was there a point during that Europa run that you actually really started to think we could do this? Or was it not until the final where you were just like, well, it's 50-50 because it's two of the worst teams in the Premier League that are not getting relegated taking each other on?
Yeah, I mean it's funny you say that because I really never gave them a chance, as kind of disheartening as it is. And it's not because I don't rate Tottenham. It was just more against particularly some of the opponents they were facing. You know, Frankfurt, AZ Alkmaar, I'm gonna butcher. Is it Bodo Glimp? Whoever they faced, before whoever they faced in the lead up to Man United in the final, I was just so certain, no matter how weak the opponent was, that they would make a mess of things as they had done throughout the season against relegation bound teams. So until it was honestly 90 plus five in the final against United, I honestly thought anything could happen and they'd probably throw away a win. And that's, I think, unfortunately, just the mentality some Tottenham fans have kind of been stuck with. It's because you become starved of success that you're not sure, honestly, what success really feels like.
Yeah, I know. I totally get it. I mean, um, the previous Spurs fan that we had on the pod, like right back at the beginning, my old uni strike partner Dave, he was going to watch the Eintracht Frankfurt game and was just convinced that they were going to lose it, be out, and be sacked. And the only silver lining of the entire season was that at least there were three worse teams in the Premier League, so you weren't going to get relegated. I mean, he was
Mm.
full on eat all mode that the sky is falling in. Now, obviously, Premier League wise, that's pretty much what happened. You survived by being the fourth worst team in the league. But
Yeah.
as that clock goes up for whatever it was, 6, 7 minutes. I can't remember how much stoppage time there was in Europe,
Mm.
but how much of it did you watch? How much were you hiding behind the sofa? Like, there's got to be the more and more it's getting towards the end, the more that oh my god, this is going to happen feeling starts coming up.
Truly, yeah. I mean, more like the oh my God, I've got no more fingernails left to chew. But I think it was slowly, yeah, as we were creeping towards, the 80s, the 90s, I was, holding out just a sliver of hope that the win would come, and it obviously did. So it was yeah, truly, so I mean, I say surreal. There are way more diehard Spurs fans out there than I am, but it was just a great feeling, and I think I felt more for, some of the players again that I said before have kind of gone through the ringer to obviously be rewarded with something like that. So that was kind of where the happiness stemmed from. But yeah, I was so stoked when they won, even though it was, I watched the whole game with the exception of about 20, 30 minutes because it was in the middle of a work day.
Yeah, yeah, I had to kind of do the same thing, but it was. I mean, let's be fair. It wasn't a brilliant game for a neutral. Not that you will care at all, because it doesn't matter. Like I still remember Arsenal beating United in an FA Cup final on penalties. It was the worst thing in the world, but it doesn't matter when
Mm.
you win. Um, I will say Spurs totally surprised me in that final because you actually never really looked like conceding. You suddenly became this really well organized defensive unit that just sort of stood there and said, "Go on, United,
Mm.
see what you've got." Like
Mm.
the moment you went 1-0 up, it was just like you were daring United to just come and see what they could do. And all they really did was just resort to pumping long balls into the box and hoping that something would happen. So after all the leakiness throughout the entire season, this is what my brain can't work out, especially because it was Manchester United. I think when you're playing European opposition, you can somehow be a different team. It
Mm,
almost doesn't matter what the league campaign is like. But when
no.
you're actually playing a Premier League team, and all year against Premier League teams, you've looked fragile and porous, it was weird to just see this Ange setting it up spot on for seeing that out for the win. It's where do you see that in terms of does that save him? Do you think Daniel Levy gives him a another chance, or has he already shut the book on that and he's looking for his replacement?
I mean, it's a good question you ask because I thought there was still no world in which a team like Tottenham that finishes 17th retains the manager for next season. You could come home with every trophy in the world, and like that's still a terrible result for the Premier League. But I read something only the other day that mentioned yes, if Levy is obviously disappointed with that 17th place finish in the Premier League, he has every right to get rid of Ange, and most owners wouldn't hesitate to do the same thing. But the argument in this article I read was that you have to look at also the kind of joy the fan base takes out of this, the kind of confidence it instills in the players after a pretty disheartening season, the encouragement it gives even the support staff and such. It really does kind of change the mentality and the fortunes overnight. And I think heading into next season, I genuinely don't know what direction they'll go. It seems like they're kicking the can down the road a little bit, but um, for me personally and selfishly, I'd love to see Ange at the helm for at least one more season. I'd be surprised if he makes it through to the end of the season if last year's anything to go by, though.
Yeah, I mean, there is some stock in the idea that it does sometimes take managers a while to get their philosophy into the players, and hitting the reset button and getting a new manager in just causes you to start all over again, and new players will come in, different philosophy for the new manager, trying to impress the new manager, and Spurs have done that so many times. They've
No.
sacked the manager and brought them in. Not that I really want to see Tottenham fly up the table, but you would have thought give him until Christmas, maybe. And if he's been able to galvanize this group of players on the back of this trophy success to adopt his philosophy even more, and then maybe get Levy to back him with some of this Champions League money to, like you say, bolster the defense a bit more. Give him a shot and see what he can
Mm,
do. And if you're down in the bottom of the doldrums again, then pull the trigger and get rid.
yeah.
But it would be harsh to drop him.
No, it would be. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think, yeah, you make a great point around just kind of that rinse and repeat cycle of new managers. I think the most fascinating thing to me is, since Poch was the manager until 2019, the likes of Mourinho, Nuno, Conte, they've all gone on to do and have success at bigger and better clubs in big leagues as well around Europe. So I have no doubt in my mind that if Ange wasn't the man for the job, he would certainly find his feet somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure he would. I mean, it will be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Mm.
So, I know you probably haven't got any bright sparks to pull from this season, but we what we also always like to do is kind of talk about sort of favorite players of either throughout your fandom and then also the ones that kind of you're really into now. You mentioned when you first
Mm.
started watching them, it was Modric and Bale. Um, what are the kind of favorite players have you had along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a past, a present, and a future. How about that, Rob?
Yeah, you do it.
Okay, so a past, I mean, yeah, Modric and Bale, obviously, but I think, interestingly enough, it was probably Berbatov, as I talked about before. I think he was the player. I mean, in many sports, it's almost sometimes you do remember the first game that you see for a team you support. You don't remember the opponent, but you just remember the player that had a great game. And for Tottenham all those years ago, it was Berbatov. When I started watching American football and was supporting the Packers for so many years, it was Aaron Rodgers. I remember a game. So I think Berbatov in the past kind of sticks out for me there. The present has to be Sonny. I mean, he's well past his prime. He's washed. You can call him whatever you want, but as you know that the captain that lifts the silverware for Tottenham is immense. And I wanted to say Kane, but and I still love Harry Kane. It's a shame he wasn't there for our first trophy in X number of years, but um, I'm just so happy for Sonny, and he's such honestly a talismanic figure in the club. And then I think future-wise, it's hard to put my name on one because we've got, Mikey Moore, Lucas Bergvall, Archie Gray. Um, but I'd probably just for a little bit of recency bias say Mickey van der Ven because of that immense save he made in the Europa League final. And he's been honestly one of my favorite players to watch and develop over the last couple of years with the team.
Yeah, he does seem to have hamstrings made of paper though.
Truly.
And I don't know if that's because of the high line they play, and he's very, very quick, so he often
Mm,
maybe gambles on the fact his pace can get him out of jail. But yeah, you do miss him when he's out.
mm.
He's a very good, say through gritted teeth, he's a very good centre back. But so when you look ahead to next season, what are you kind of what are you hoping for? Because so obviously hoping for better than 17th in the league, but what are you realistically? You've got a Champions League campaign now because you qualified for that through winning the Europa. What are you, let's say, what are you hoping for? And then maybe what do you think will happen? Because maybe they're not the same thing.
Honestly, great question. What do I hope for? I want to be realistic, as much as I want to be optimistic. I'd love to see Tottenham back in the top six at the very least. Do I see that happening? Probably not. They'd really need to recruit hard in summer, and I'm not quite sure Levy's the kind of owner that's willing to splurge. So just be competitive again. Realistically, there's, like you said before, there's been moments where they've been great and moments where they've been absolute dog water. But I think right now, just to have them back in the winner's circle on a consistent basis, obviously any team would love to lift some form of silverware throughout or at the end of the season. Maybe a local or a domestic cup like the Carabao FA Cup. We saw the teams like Newcastle and Crystal Palace this year lift those. So if Spurs can, put together another run, I think that would be, yeah, a great and reassuring sign that things are on the up again.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at the league table, and it just is blatantly obvious which end of the field that you need to fix
Mm,
because you scored 64 goals this season, right?
yep.
Which puts you like Brentford had 66, Brighton had 66. Nope, Villa of Forest didn't outscore you. Newcastle had
I think
68.
we tied with Chelsea. Did we?
City had 72, we had 69, and Liverpool had
Mm,
86. So, you're right up there, like top eight
mm,
for goals for. Just unfortunately,
mm,
65 shipped is only out really
mm.
outside. Well, Wolves let in 69, and then obviously the bottom three just let in about 3,000 goals each. But
Yeah,
it just stands out as such a stat that you're just so porous at the
it is.
back. So like you say, maybe invest in someone to go alongside Van de Ven, a little bit more maybe defensive focus rather than everybody charging forward. And I could easily see
Mm,
after such a horrific season, I could easily see Spurs being up in that 8, 9, 10 spot. And then if they're there in that eight spot
mm.
and they've got their eye on a European come sort of like post January, then I think I think Ange stays. I got this funny feeling that he is going to stay for the start of next season. They'll give him preseason, give him a couple of new players, make some sort of challenge to him. You need to be doing this by this date, otherwise you're out of here.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but I think it just stems from, a whether the manager wants to spend the money on new players, which hasn't really been a theme of the past, and B, if they can avoid injuries, which has been also a big problem for the team the last year and a half. So put all of the good things together and hopefully we deliver a season that's probably more representative of the team's potential.
Yeah, yeah. I think it'd definitely be interesting just to see how it all shakes out because I would have thought if he's going to change manager, the common sense thing is to like do it like now in the next couple of weeks. Because if you go all the way through preseason, all the way through a transfer window, and everyone thinks it's Ange's team, and then come August, they go, yeah, Ange, you're out, and we're bringing in this new guy for the start of the season. That's pointless because a new manager needs preseason,
It
right?
is.
So I think
Yeah.
probably if he's going to go in the next week or so, and let a new manager have a crack at the preseason.
Yeah. I mean, I'd prefer that from a consistency standpoint too. So we'll have to wait and see, to be honest.
Well, time is starting to creep up on us. We are coming towards the end here, so really appreciate you coming on and doing this, Rob. Okay, we haven't got the weekly predictions that I can do because the season's over. So Do we try and force you into giving a league table position for next season? I mean, that's a long-standing prediction that we'd have to check in on next year. But yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Two predictions from you. Does Ange start the season, and then where do you end the season? Let's nail your colours to the mast there.
And starts the season and Spurs finish seventh.
Ooh, seventh. Okay, well we will lock that in and we will check in a year's. That's a long prediction. Normally I just do match day predictions, but season's over, so we can't really do that.
It's gonna age like old milk.
Hey, who knows? Maybe you will have undersold it and they will outperform that prediction. So
Fingers crossed.
anyway, pleasure as always talking to you, Rob. Thank you so much for coming on. And good luck with all the Formula One fantasy stuff and Spurs for the new season.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was great catching up with Rob. And as you might be aware, that means we've now covered Spurs twice. Yes, I have no problem with covering clubs more than once. And in fact, we're probably going to revisit Liverpool and Crystal Palace over the next couple of weeks to get fans on there to not only give us their own fandom story, but also insights to those recent trophies they've won. So I'd also love to get a Newcastle fan on, by the way, to talk about the Carabao Cup. But essentially, this is a call to arms that if you've listened and you've enjoyed and you want to come on and tell your fan story, then get in contact. Doesn't matter if you've already covered the club before. I don't really want to do the same club to back each week. But other than that, it's all fair game. Come along, tell us why you love your team. Cheers.